Hey kids, welcome to Stylus Rumble pencil time thing. Today's part 2 of our pencil tool, and we're going to go even farther down the pencil rabbit hole. Last week we went over the basics of the tools, stuff like that. So if you're completely new, start with that one and work your way over here. So there are a couple tools that I didn't happen to mention when I was doing the first one, because I kind of took for granted, like, oh, everybody knows how to do this stuff. So first, I just want to talk about how to use these handles. So with your contour editor or your pencil editor, yeah, he gives you handles as well. You can see, you can do some stuff with it, but if you hold Alt, you can move one of these guys, and if you hold Alt and then click a point, it's going to straighten those handles out towards its neighbor. So here, if I bring this guy down here, just by dragging, if I hold Alt and then click, it's going to straighten that out. It saves you tons of time, and then you can move each individual handle by holding Alt and selecting the one you want to do. So Alt is your best friend. Here, if I click, I'm not going to get handles. Hold Alt, I get the handles. So if you somehow, like, your handles are too small to grab, hit Alt and you can get them back. And you might want to drag them out like that. So that's something I take for granted. Another tool, we're going to go to tool properties. When you're using your contour editor, you get the option of this guy here, show contour editor controls. The hotkey is Alt F5. And what you can do with this guy is when you select a bunch of points and you turn this on or hit Alt F5, it gives you a little dealie that you can manipulate it with, like a manipulator tool. And it's not visible by default. You can move it up here and stretch it like that, move it down here, and then rotate from this point. So this is super helpful when you're doing such a, especially like lip sync, and you're mucking around with the pencil tool rather than trying to drag everything into place. You can often get away with using your contour editor tool and this show contour editor controls. Super useful tool. I take for granted that I remember that these things exist. I'm so sorry. If there are other little tools I've forgotten, please let me know in the comments. Because sometimes you use something so much that you forget that you use it, right? Other people do that. That's a thing. The next step, we're going to go into pencil textures. So we're going to grab this guy here. There are a couple places where you can find it. One is in your color tab. So in your color tab, and let me just apologize for giving Blue so many textures. Like, his color palette is a nightmare. Oh, it's so bad. Okay, so if you're looking for your pencil textures, you can find them in two places. One is the color tab, and that's your pen style opacity things. And that comes in as a default with any of your scenes in Harmony. And that'll give you access to all of these different textures here. And then you also, in your tool properties, when you're using the pencil tool, you can click on your advanced pencil options guy, this triangle here, and it has a texture tab. So you're able to have your texture tab over here open, as well as your colors, because you can use the colors and the textures together when you're using the pencil tool. My favorite is Bumpy. Where's Bumpy? Bumpy thin. Me. So if we take a look at this guy under the render, come here, color card, you can see that you can get a variety of different pencil textures that just come pre-installed. There's lots of good ones. Dots if you need a dotted line. Dash. Whoopee! Look at all these things. Yep. All right, so lots of stuff you can play with there. You can create your own. So you can, if I scale this up, you can see what the texture actually looks like. It's just like a 16-bit cactus texture. This guy here. And these textures, you're going to be able to use all the same tools. So here, my pencil editor works. It might not always look as nice as we want it to, depending on the texture and how that decides to work itself out. But all these things do what you would expect them to do with textured lines. But the texture itself, you could create your own. So you just need to create a little rectangle image file that's going to line up with itself. Unless you want it to be something like a dash where it has space, then you're going to want to leave a little bit of space at the end. But the texture itself is nothing really complicated. You just make a little rectangle approximately looking like what you want your stuff to look like. There are a number of places to import your texture. One is inside your advanced pencil properties. There's a little plus sign here, new texture. Over here, the little drop down menu, new texture. Bloop. You can import anything that you created. Most regular files work, like JPEG, PNG, stuff like that. You could rename it, delete textures. You can use as default pencil texture palette, so you can actually set it as a default. That's always useful. And over here in your color tab, you can also import a texture here as well. There's a plus sign, that's new color, and then there's a new texture button, which you'll actually have to import the texture from your computer. If you use the brush tool with these, you can paint the texture in, and it tiles it. So all of these guys tile fairly well. You can get some polka dots and stuff. So you can tile all these guys using your brush tool. If you're using the pen tool, you actually have the option of using color as well. So here we can have our red charcoal, and now we can paint with red charcoal, or we can have green bumpy, and it's going to paint green bumpy. But if you use your brush tool, you can't do that. You can't tile a green chalk. It will switch back and forth. So that's something to note. Textures and your pencil tool work a little bit differently than these same textures and your brush tool. Even in 15, this is 15 I'm using, but 14, 15, same thing. Oh, that looks kind of neat. Oh, I should use that for effects. Wow. Okay, so you also, in your tools up here, you have a gradient editor or texture editor. That works with this guy because this guy is a texture. So the texture editor works on your pencil texture as well. So here I'm not actually affecting the line itself. This is a different tool. It's the gradient editor tool. And I'm able to rotate my texture around like this and rotate this part, and you can scale it up and scale it down. Everything you can do when you paint in a texture and use this guy. See, you can rotate and stuff when you use the brush tool. You can do that as well with your pencil. So you can edit your pencil texture using the texture editor tool. That's long-winded. So you may be thinking like, oh, cool. So that's how I could animate this texture, is by creating a few little dealies here, a few little drawing substitutions. And it'll certainly work where you come in and you muck about with the texture. And now as I go along my frames, I'm going to get a few different ones. And I can copy that, paste special, and paste my cycle 33 or however many times. Because I'm not going to just paste. That's crazy. There's a tool for that. But now, as I animate along, I'm going to get an animated texture. So that's one way you could do it. And if you're dealing with something that's only one drawing, say you are doing a sparky effect or something, and you want an animated halo of glowy crap around it, you could certainly do something like this and get away with it and move on with your life. But if you're animating a full character, if I just grab blue for a second here. All right, so if we open up Blue's rig, I'm not sure, this is one of my test rigs, so I'm not sure if he's going to explode just by opening it. But if you pop in here, you can see how many different drawings actually exist within Blue's rig. And he's a fairly simple character overall if you're looking at a fully developed rigged character. He's not overly complex. He doesn't have a difficult costume. He doesn't have tons of different layers of hair or anything. And there's still a substantial number of these drawings. So first, just the idea of going through every single one of Blue's drawings and creating 3 or 4 different drawing substitutions and then duplicating them, that is just a mountain of work. It's a huge undertaking to do that. And then on top of that, once the animators come in here and they start shifting their keys around, they're going to ruin it. They're going to break everything. So your first instinct would be to lock the layer. But here, if I grab this stuff and drag on a locked layer, it doesn't prevent them from being extended because the timeline exposure isn't included in that lock. All right. So that's, for a simple thing, that would be the simplest way to do it. Like I said, a little effect where you just need a texture that kind of boils a little bit, something like that. Just using your texture editor and creating some drawing substitutions is a good solution for that. But with a full character, you're going to want a different solution. I will even share it with you. That's going to be the color override. Bloop. So the color override, I don't know if you've ever actually taken the time to look at the color override ports. Bloop. So let's take a look at those. The first one is a texture port. And when you throw some stuff in here, We throw a guy over here. Some of these have the word texture in them, and that's where this thing comes in, this texture port. Here is texture transformation. Our bells lighting up. So you can import a texture and you can transform a texture as well. These are options given to you in this fancy little node. The trick is, though, you can only, like, it doesn't stack. So you have a number, you have to kind of make your choice when you're creating your initial rig, what you need the texture to do. If you just have a character, you don't need an animated texture, you just need to add a texture. That's pretty simple to do. So first I check the palette out that Blue's rig palette is in, which is boy. And then new 8 is what all these black trace lines are done in. So I'm gonna grab new 8, click this button to bring it over here, and that's how I'm able to make changes in the individual color overrides palette. So if I just want to use a texture, and I happen to have this rainbow texture available because I thought it would be really fun and festive, what I can do is put that into the texture port. So now on this guy here, I'm going to click on where it says new RGBA. I'm going to come down and use the input image as from the texture here. So now it's going to think really hard. You're my fan stressing out about this. And now our entire character's texture has been replaced by this rainbow. So if you're using pencil lines, this doesn't really work as well. You can see some of the parts are kind of invisible and some of them are very thin. If I replace this with just a brush, you can see that it's working much better. I'm able to change the brush wherever I want and maintain the shape, and then I can move the image around. So it works sort of just like a mask would. But if you have something complex like a character, but it has brush lines, it's going to use those brush lines a little bit more sensibly than just a flat mask, because it'll maintain the arm being behind the body, as an example. So here, like I said, the pencil line doesn't work as well with this particular version of the color override, but you can see that it's not bringing the lines forward by running them through a filter. Whereas if you use this color override as a mask for that, it wouldn't understand how the Z-axis worked. So there's that. This is a good option if you have a brush character to just throw in a thing like that. You can also, if you have a brush, something bloop, like this, let's say a TV screen where we have this rainbow, we can replace that with an actual rendered file. So this is an image sequence, and this is going to act as a mask for the image sequence. Again, like another way of doing the mask using this color override. So when you're looking at this color override thing, you have a whole slew of guys available as well. These texture original matrix, global B-box matrix. The best place to get some good information on that is to actually go to the toonboom help menu, and it shows you what each of them does. So the original matrix, the G-box matrix. So you can see this one's filling each of the circles. This one's kind of the entire, all of the different pieces it's being stretched among them. And I'm not sure what the precise difference is between each of them. Like these two look very similar to me. These three look very similar to me. So I don't know the math behind there, and I'm not really interested in looking it up. But if you want to, it's there in the help menu. But we can just use original matrix for now. And then you have this little folder here, and you can double click that, and now you can go and find your texture. In this case, it's my rainbow, because a rainbow is pretty easy to see. So if you use the original matrix, this looks more like your actual pencil tool when you grab the stuff out of your paint here. So if you just want to replace your pencil tool with a texture line, that's an option using this guy, which is a little bit better, I think, than using the input image. And if you use these other ones, B-box matrix just doesn't work for Blue, except in his eyes. So this seems the global B-box matrix only wants to do it for paint, because these are filled, so his eyes are working, but the pencil line here isn't working with the B-box matrix. I don't know what that could possibly mean. Global B-box centered? That one works, and you can see I'm getting chunks of texture. So here, the entire thing stretched out. Here you can see the seams of the character. the way that they're stretched out with the B-box centered. Global, a similar but different version of that. My method is to just click on a bunch of things and see which one looks prettiest. But you can go and look up what that means for surezies. And there's even more stuff in here. Modulate pencil texture color. That seems to work with our texture here. Override this texture centered on overridden object's center. So what that's doing, it seems to be just using our texture and then just spreading the entire texture across the character based on the center of the image. Let me just see. So if I actually bring my texture back in, you can see that it's using this area here and just spreading that out among the character. And anything, of course, you do with your character, it'll work out how to get that done using your texture. So the next thing is if you want to animate the textures themselves, so here we have our chalk and charcoal guys. If you want to animate these textures, we can use the color override for that. But your character needs to be set up with textures from the beginning. So I'm using 2 through a composite so you can see it's going to affect both of them, and I can overlap them so you can see that they're working. So inside of our color override, find the texture that we're using here. So I said I use chalk, boop, and we can use 1 color override for all of this stuff. We don't need 2. And I'm using charcoal. Bloop. And now for these 2, instead of new RGBA, we're going to use change pencil texture transformation. Bloop, bloop. So your first instinct would be use input peg, but that doesn't work for me. So change pencil texture transformation. Now what we can do is input a peg here, and in our render view, we can use that peg to animate our texture. Boop, boop, boop. Here I can do whatever I need, and this way what I can do is animate along here on my timeline the changes that I want in my textures. Rotating doesn't work for this particular thing. We can scale up, scale down, do various things with the textures. That might be fairly boily. And you can't see it here, but you can copy and paste, again using your paste special, and then render it out. Alright, so no matter how many textures your character has, this just kind of looks like a wub 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 wub. But you can animate it whatever way you need it to look, to give you that look that you want in your character. And then paste it along. And because your peg is not connected here to your character, the animators are probably not going to shift around. But if they do, you can just re-import this 1 peg on your color override and you can fix all the things that they've broken, instead of having a problem where multiple different drawing sources are really getting broken. So let's see. Okay, so translate is going to rotate it around these circles. Whee! That'll probably look a little better than my wub look. Blah, 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 blah. So there you have some wiggly texture. And these, of course, are massive. Bumpy. So this one, I think, works really well with the bumpy texture. So this is just the animated bumpy texture, using the exact same method I did with the other guys. And this one, I think, looks most like sticking around, that sort of jazz. And you don't need to have it go this fast. You can put it on 2s, if that's what your production is doing. Set it all up on 2s. Make sure you copy with an empty frame here, then paste special with your cycle, and you can do the same thing on 2s. Hooray! So if you do want to do this with your entire character, you just need to set it up initially so that you're using the bumpy texture, whichever one's right for your production, right from the get-go. Your entire character is designed with the texture line, and then you can use a color override here, set to change pencil texture transformation, and you can animate that line as much or as little as you want. So if you have a thing where it's still, like often you'll see the character when they're moving around, the line is really wobbly, but if you have a hold, you can put a hold in here just by deleting the keyframes. Bloop. And if you are doing sort of a little bit more of a complex thing where whatever is moving has this on it, you can copy this transformation, this color override, into your character rig, say just on the arm that's moving or just on the head that's moving, and you could do it that way. You just have to take your time and be a little conscious of where it needs to be on and off, and that's all just done with this peg. Hopefully that makes sense. So I think that covers the gambit. Alright, so that's it. I think that's everything I could possibly find on the pencil tool. And remember that that includes this line, rectangle, ellipse, polyline. All of these guys are considered like pencil tools just because of the way that they're created. Let me check my notes. So that's it. If you happen to know of any tools I didn't mention or any like pencil tool theory things that you use that help you get through your day using this pencil tool, by all means share it with me in the comments. If you have any future tutorials you want to see or tools you'd like to see more in depth or nodes that I haven't gone over, please leave that down below. Like, share, subscribe, all those things internet people ask you to do, and I will see you in the next video, which is going to be on Sunday, because for December I'm doing one video a week and it's so relaxing. Yes.